The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, brought to you by Vocal, Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Mediacom Channel 15 in the greater Des Moines area. It airs Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock p.m. and again Wednesday evening at 9:30. You can also see the program on Cox Channel 23 for those who are in the Council Bluffs area, and it's shown every other Thursday at 4:30 p.m. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com. My telephone number here in Des Moines is area code 515-276-3956. John's number is area code 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. CPI, that stands for Child Protection in Iowa. There's a couple of missions that we strive to meet. Those missions have to do with, number one, influencing public policy as it relates to child protection issues, and number two, um, has to do with working with individuals who are having difficulties with the Department of Human Services. If you can find people who have been on that path before, that might be one way of helping you through a problem. We're not attorneys, so we can't hold ourselves out to practice law without a license. That seems to be the current thinking now. Is
have you
that
ever had an attorney produce a license to you when you walk in and see him?
I've never seen an attorney's license, but they certainly anyone who's tried this has gotten a letter of warning that you're practicing law without a license. No, I'm practicing law as a citizen. And if I'm to know the law, I should be able to practice it to the extent that I need protection from the attorneys who otherwise could do me in.
I remember asking an attorney about that subject, and he said, "Oh yes, I know about it. I've heard about it," but he couldn't quote it in
No,
the law.
no.
So it's a figment of their imagination, and they can talk and talk. So,
You can do a lot by through intimidation.
yep.
Intimidation is a mighty, mighty powerful tool, and it can be done by officials real easily. Social workers do it all the time. Just say, "Hey, fella, you scramble out of this house, or I'll have you arrested, and you won't see your children again." So a little bit of intimidation like that, to a common ordinary citizen who doesn't know the law and doesn't know, and of course you can't learn that at school because they're not. That's something that would be good for the mind to know, wouldn't it?
Doesn't she have the power to order somebody out of the house?
She certainly doesn't. She has very little authority, which, in my estimation, they should be warned not to do that. Well, Don, we've been talking about a 2,000-foot rule, and the state passed that back in 2002. It was challenged as unconstitutional. It wound up in the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, which reversed that decision of unconstitutionality, sent it back, and now in the past legislative session, they passed House File 619, which added all kinds of glorious things to the 2,000-foot rule, which essentially makes Devil's Island out of every city in the state of Iowa. Really, it doesn't go quite as far as some of the cities would like to go themselves. Because if you kick them out of Des Moines, they may go to the suburbs. So that each suburb has met together to say, well, we don't want those sexual offenders in our neighborhood either. By the way, the population of sexual offenders has never been correctly identified. So anyone who has had some kind of a crime against a child in the last 25 years, they haven't even considered such things as what is a child. We normally think of a child as being someone who is under the age of 18. But when you look at these laws critically, and you look at them detail by detail, you find out there are differences in the way they handle child cases. Well, Don, Polk County decided that they were going to protect all of their customers, all of their residents, from such things as child predators living in rural Polk County, outside of cities, but inside the county. So they've added some things. What did they add recently, Don, um, to the rules for the to supplement the state's 2,000-foot rule, which means that sexual offenders who've already served their time and have been identified by one hook or crook to be a sexual offender can't live within 2,000 foot of a daycare center or a school. Added to that are little extra details by Polk County. What did Polk County do?
This article is by Kevin Dobbs, Register staff writer, written November 23rd. Supervisors vote to bolster state law aimed at child molesters beginning December 6th. More than 90% of Polk County will be off limits to house hunting child molesters next month when the county joins Des Moines and most of its suburbs with sharp limits on where most sex offenders are allowed to live. County supervisors said Tuesday they had no choice but to bolster a state law that prevents people who committed sex crimes against people from living within 2,000 feet of schools and registered child care providers. John, it says these people have committed sex crimes against children from living within 2,000 feet. Does that apply to more than just the people that have been convicted of that crime?
No.
Okay.
All of them are convicted of the crime.
Okay. The new ordinance, which takes effect December 6th, covers unincorporated areas and adds public parks, swimming pools, libraries, and recreational trails. The vote was unanimous. It is, quote, "It is not a perfect solution, but is it the only one we have right now? Yes," unquote. Republican Supervisor E.J. Giovannetti said. The people of rural Polk County needs protection too. Offenders who move to rural Polk County, before the ordinance takes effect are exempt from the broader restrictions. So that's like being grandfathered in. If you've been living out there a while, the law doesn't affect you. Des Moines police have said about 300 offenders will be forced out of the city this year. Nearly as many are expected to be pushed from several suburbs. Leaders in Ankeny, Altoona, Clive, Grimes, Johnston, Pleasant Hill, Reynolds, West Des Moines, and Urbandale have approved restrictions similar to the capitals. Polk City officials will consider new restrictions Monday. Elected officials in Windsor Heights did not consider their own ordinance because the state law covers the entire city. Several more Iowa cities have passed or will consider new restrictions. Polk County said they were compelled to expand the state restrictions because rural residents feared an influx of sex offenders from the cities. I don't think we had any other choice under the circumstances, said Tom Hoxton Smith, a Democrat and the supervisor's chairman. Quote, rural folks have very serious concerns about offenders moving in on them, and I think these are valid concerns. Polk is the first Iowa county to pass such restrictions according to the Iowa Association of Counties. Sex offenders have complained since the state law went into effect earlier this year that such bans made it nearly impossible to find a place to live. Some say the rules unfairly lump in low-risk offenders with rapists and pedophiles. Megan King of Des Moines said that when her fiancé was 19 years old, he had consensual sex with a teenage girl who was a few years younger. He later was convicted of sexual assault because the girl was a minor. King said that her fiancé regrets the affair and is not someone who preys on children. It's just not fair that the couple in their 20s is banned from buying a home in Greater Des Moines. Polk County Sheriff's officers said it will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in added personnel and equipment to enforce the new rules. County Attorney John Saccone said the law is not a
Panacea?
panacea because it restricts only where offenders can live, not where they go. Some residents have complained to the supervisors that the restrictions go too far for little benefit. The Devil's Island approach to settling social problems is medieval. Medieval. That goes back a long time.
Mid-centuries.
Said Nan Stillins of Des Moines. The supervisors said they will challenge state lawmakers to find new ways to protect children. Giovannetti said the supervisors will form a task force of representatives from the sheriff's office, the county attorney's office, social services, and other agencies to brainstorm possible options. At this point, we don't have the answers, but we want to bring together the experts, he said. The supervisors asked legislators last week to make the state residency restrictions supersede local laws to eliminate the domino effect on policy making. They asked legislators to consider a program that would enable law enforcement officials to identify high-risk offenders and discussed more investment in electronic monitoring equipment to track them. Several lawmakers said they do not plan to repeal the state law, but will consider minor changes.
Okay. That's interesting because that's happening all over these little communities. Johnston and Ankeny and everything all, have to get together and make their own public policy to fill in the cracks, so that they're basically banishing these people from the area. Now, banishment, if it can be proved, is totally unconstitutional. They're real happy the fact that the United States Supreme Court turned down a case on the 2,000-foot rule, and so they think they can do anything they please. But if they approach that banishment issue or any one of a number of other issues, it's going to present a problem. In a session held on November the 30th at the state capitol, they are looking at an Illinois law that doesn't have as much to say about residential restrictions as it does areas around schools. For example, if you're a sex offender, you can't be within 1,000 foot of the school unless you have contacted the administration of the school and tell them, what you're there for, and how long you'll be. So it puts a net around each of the protected areas, and apparently that law may hold up as far as being constitutional. So we may be going that route. It's something like the drug-free zone around schools in some areas. Well, so much for the sex offender law. I want to get later on into the program, if not this program, then on a subsequent program, I want to talk about how we deal with public policy problems. And in a news article in the Des Moines Register, it was shown what I've been saying all the time, that this case in Cedar Rapids, where we've thrown hundreds of thousands of dollars into an experimental program up there. A lot of this money was thrown into the program to aid children. The figures now say it was the results were very disappointing. So, but what have they been guided by? They've been guided by this principle. If you have a difficult public policy problem, the solution always is to throw money at it. Well, that's what they did in Cedar Rapids, and they've spent millions of dollars of Iowa funds to send up there to do this experimental. Someone had in their noggin some way of taking care of sex abuse cases. Did you remember that it was Cedar Rapids where we had the most recent kidnapping, murder of a 10-year-old child, rape and murder of a 10-year-old child that has disturbed the entire state and has disturbed the Iowa General Assembly into doing all kinds of silly things with the laws? If a child in Iowa is to be safe, you would think that with all of that brain power and with all of that money that they had in to spend in Cedar Rapids, that that money, that great money, should have solved the problem. Just the contrary is true. What were you saying, Terrance?
I was wondering, I said, are you sure that they have brain power?
Go ahead. Say that again.
I said, were you sure that they have brain power?
Well,
Because a lot of the public policies that they seem to come up with seem to either reflect the legislative lynch mob mentality or a special interest mentality.
that's right. Okay.
Maybe a better word is being brain dead.
There you go.
Well,
And money hungry.
I think we ought. I think we ought to throw out this this general principle that the best thing to do in public policy, if you need a solution, to throw money at it. That's what they're doing right now, and it seems as though they're not going to quit until they have all the money in their hands, and so they can go into these clever ideas. Well, we're going to listen to just a few minutes while we go back on that November 30th date at the Capitol, and we're going to listen to a co-chairman of a committee that's looking into all of these affairs on the 2,000-foot rule. Someone called his speech grandstanding, political grandstanding. We'll listen to it and see what you might call this speech. This is by a fellow by the name of Keith Kryman. He's from southeast Iowa, where all those good things happen, like the fellow that shoots up the city council, and we get characters like Governor Vilsack, and all kinds of good things come from southeast Iowa. Isn't that true? Well, here, State Capitol on November 30th, as these wizards of the General Assembly attempt to solve some real problems. Here's Keith Kryman.
Time out, and then I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a position where I think this committee and this legislature should not politically grandstand. I think that the issue on sex abuse
That was
is so important
KCCI crossing
to
the
people in the
scene.
state of Iowa.
They do it several
that
times.
2.9 million Iowans expect Democratic and Republican legislators to get together with the best and brightest in law enforcement and all other specialties and determine what best things we can do to better protect our children and our communities. And Tom, you were a little bit concerned about why you were here a second time. You're here as part of the law enforcement and your thoughts on what we can do better, what changes we need to make in order to better protect our children and communities. Now, in our legislation this spring, we dealt with a number of areas. We dealt with the increased supervision for sex offenders. Okay? If you're a sex offender convicted of a misdemeanor, you're going to have 10 years of supervision. A felony, you're going to have lifetime supervision. We talked about requiring, we required, we didn't talk about it, we required treatment from these offenders. We helped with victim notification, and we added some more electronic monitoring. Since then, the state of Illinois has come up with a safety zone idea. I know that our deputies and our sheriff's association and law enforcement out on the street are very, very concerned about these pedophiles who sit across the street from a park or a school playground and, figure out who their next victim is going to be. And right now, there's nothing in the law that prevents them from doing it. Sex offenders can, even though we've got the 2,000-foot residency requirement, can come into schools and be around children, and they can volunteer at the elementary carnival. And they don't have to tell the principal or other administrators that they're there and that they're convicted sex offenders, child sex offenders.
Senator Kramer, do you have any?
Yes, I do have a
If
question.
you've got a question after,
Yeah,
I would prefer we leave for committee discussion.
It's coming.
Political grandstanding.
With that,
Excuse me. Very equal time over here, Senator.
but again, in the spirit of cooperation, bipartisan look at these issues, I want the county attorney's opinion, in specific opinions. Okay. One, and I think you gave it on the safety zone idea. I think you said you'd like that. The 2,000-foot law, you told us before there's a number of ambiguities in that, including whether it applies to schools and daycares which have come into existence since 2002. What I would like to see from law enforcement is some specific recommendations. What you've given us, and I very much appreciate it, what you've given us is you said, okay, here's this language and it's a problem. Here's this language and it's a problem. But what we haven't seen is we have this language, it's a problem, and this is how we would like to see it be fixed, because this fix is going to be the best thing to better protect our children in our communities. So as you go through that list that you gave us before, I would very much appreciate you providing to me, to the other co-chairs, and others, your recommendations on how those things need to be fixed. I want to ask you specifically, though, today. And I really thought that this was, you know, I thought we went into this meeting with the thought of coming up with bipartisan, you know, agreements and thoughts on what we can do better to protect our children and communities, but I'm still hopeful we'll get there. The 2,000-foot lot, do we need to change it to include those new schools and new daycares? Yes or no?
Yes, I think that the intent was not that, at least my understanding, the intent was that they be included.
This gentleman
No
heads
sense
the
that someone couldn't
State
live by,
Prosecuting Association.
Could live by a new school and then isn't allowed to live by a school that's been replaced by another school. It's outside of town.
And then specific, again, the convicted sex offender, pedophile, who wants to volunteer at the school carnival, okay, with all these kids floating around, should they be required to give notice to the administration that they're going to be there and what they're going to be doing and how long they're going to be there?
I think that's part of some of the legislation in Illinois and the safety zones. They, some affirmative obligations, they provide notice that they're there and check in with the principals so they have knowledge.
Thank you very much, both you and
Thank you, I'm trying to be very brief.
Well, there you have it. The co-chairman, it sounds as though he may be backing off the 2,000-foot rule and changing it for something that Illinois has. You see, it was perfectly good legislation that 100% of our assemblymen voted for last July, last spring. It came into effect in July. And now all of a sudden, we've got another glorious things that the neighbors have. And we'd like to have what the neighbors have because it might be better than what we have. Well, I kind of wonder what happened to common sense? What happened to some stability of thought before we start putting these things together? It's good, I suppose, after the fact to find out how cluttered the minds of those who put this 2,000-foot together rule together were. Minds must have really been cluttered to make a goofy error like this. But in the meantime, hundreds of people are having to find houses in areas. In fact, I'll tell you one of the silly things. You see, in order for a law to be constitutional, it has to give sufficient notice to the person so that he can steer between what is allowed and what is prohibited. Now, he's not allowed to live within 2,000 foot of a daycare center, but the daycare center doesn't have to announce their location. Now, how do you know if a daycare center refuses to disclose their location? How do you know whether you're living within 2,000 foot of that daycare center? That is the kind of thinking that has transpired with this 2,000 foot rule. You know, there are some other rather ridiculous things that happen in law, and I probably shouldn't use the word ridiculous in the same paragraph that I used the word, the name Terrance Walker in, but that's the kind of things he deals with, is the ridiculous. Let's turn to the ridiculous part of the criminal law, the justice system. And to speak about that, Terrance Walker.
Thanks for having me on the show again, Jonathan. And yes, I am the self-proclaimed or God-appointed judge of the judges here for the judges here in the state. There's probably no other place you can get some information like this that we share on a week-to-week basis, information pertaining to the judiciary and, as John Harvey so eloquently put, the ridiculous aspects of the law. You know, not only legislators can be ridiculous, judges a lot of times can be ridiculous. And on that note, I think I want to go to a story that we got out of Maine. Matter of fact, no, actually Maryland. And if you could just show the people this here. The courts in Maryland on November 18th, as part of their educational outreach program, developed a pair of coloring books for children designed to introduce them to the legal system and the judicial branch of government. And it's entitled Learning the Law and Learning More About the Law. And they're designed for children 3rd grade or younger. They include a variety of activities such as fill in the blank and matching your terms with pictures, and a fun way to learn about the legal system. And as part of the judiciary's public awareness, the books are the latest method by the judiciary to outreach to the community. The whole purpose of the coloring books is to provide a vehicle by which young children can be educated about the courts and the judiciary in a fun and informative context, said Judge Jean Zakaris Barron, chair on the Committee of Public Awareness. We even adopted a mascot, Chester the Crab, who was featured as part of a judicial guide. The children will find him absolutely endearing. Well, as if the judiciary doesn't have anything else to do to clean up its act or to educate people about what's really going on with the law. Why don't we just look at some of the coloring book here, and maybe we can all learn a little bit about what should be taught about the current state of the law as it is, not as these books like to portray. Learning the Law, coloring book. Can you flip the page to the next page? And there we have Chester the Crab. You know the Pledge of Allegiance, don't you? Well, it's sad to say, I don't think that a lot of judges know the Pledge of Allegiance or truly understand its import. But anyway, go to the next page if you can, Don. I hate to have you be the page turner. All right. Here in the Capitol,
Would you prefer
Chester
a
the
judge
Crab is up there.
turning the page, Terrance?
well, I don't know if he has an IQ high enough to turn the page, to tell you the truth. This is the State House. This is where the laws are made. This is what Chester the Crab says. Well, and this is in Annapolis, Maryland, of course. Well, what the page should say is that this is the Iowa Judicial Building. This is where a lot of the laws are made. Can you go to the next page?
This is where we spent $30 million.
And this is where we waste a
there?
lot of taxpayers' money.
Oh, on taxpayer money.
All right, now we've got Chester the Crab on the police badge. Well, that's kind of funny. And this is law enforcement. We keep things in order. Well, sometimes they don't keep things in order, especially when the judges allow them to keep things in disorder. And I've seen many cases where the judges just simply allow the police officers to do what they want. And on the next page of this coloring book, we've got
What do you got there, Terrance?
well, we should have a judge. This is what we should be having a judge behind here. This is what we should do to judges that abuse their authority. But Chester the Crab says, this man was arrested by the police. The judge found him guilty of breaking the law and sent him to jail. Well, what if a judge breaks the law? What happens in that case? We see time and time again, the judge is often forgiven. And a lot of instances, such as the judge here in Iowa, which got caught a second time on the DUI charge, he got a pension from the state, getting 60% of his income for the rest of his life. Now we have Chester the Crab. The judge is in charge of the courtroom. You bet you're right. I guess this is about the most accurate depiction they have on these pages, because you're right. The judge, most judges want to be in control of the courtroom, whether they're right or wrong.
This one went out golfing. Did you notice that?
Yeah,
Right there.
I noticed.
He and the witness went out golfing.
Is the judge also in control of the jury?
Well, they like to be in control of everything. A lot of these judges are egomaniacal, and sometimes they tell the jury things that they shouldn't tell them, as it pertains to the law in the case. And they give them misreadings of the law, their misreadings, and tell them that they have to follow those misreadings regardless. And of course, if a person that is subject to this unfair treatment appeals, a lot of cases, I'd say 99% of the time, the appellate court will say harmless error. So this is what we're up against.
Along that line, did you notice that they asked the jury to swear that they will follow the judge's ruling, even though he hasn't given his instructions? They will follow instructions that he has yet to develop. Now that puts a
That
lot of
is
faith in the
trust.
judge, doesn't it?
Yeah, I tell you what, it's a case a lot of times where the judges have this discretion, but discretion a lot of times goes too far because they should have uniform instructions, but a lot of times the judges and the legislators are at fault because they could set all this aside. The legislatures could make them give these instructions and make it against the law for a judge to make up his own instructions, regardless of the uniform instructions. I've seen countless times where they have these uniform instructions they're supposed to give, and the judge just goes ahead and submits his own instructions, not ones approved by the legislator at all, which is why I said before that they should have had that picture with the judiciary at the top where Chester the Crab would say, "This is where the laws are made."
That's right.
But could you go to the next picture? I think there's just a few more here. And this that's a very interesting looking judge. Looks like a rock star almost, huh?
Uh-huh.
So does the clerk. Well, the clerk's got some big glasses on.
Is that a man or a woman on the bench?
I couldn't tell you.
She has a mustache, so it must be.
A lot of hair, though.
Okay, right.
You go to the next picture. This is
The
the one.
clerk is pretty cute too.
Yeah. That's kind of sexist. They did make the court reporter a woman. All right, now this is the really interesting picture. This is the way to the courthouse. Now what we should be teaching the kids is that, can you show the guy at the bottom? That this is how hard we make it for a person to make it an appeal to the Supreme Court. Look at that, it's so confusing. So if you're trying to obtain justice, boys and girls, this is how hard it's going to be.
I made it up there already though, Terrance.
Did you?
Yeah, I think I did. Maybe I jumped a track. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, you have to jump a lot of hoops and hurdles to get justice in this day and age, especially when you want to get justice from a higher court. You can go to the next picture. I think John has got some more stories after this. And this big building is the courthouse. This is where you go when you have to be in court. And this is where they spend a large percentage of your tax dollars, boys and girls. So when you start paying taxes, you're gonna give your money for this. And they're gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger unless we do something else. But one more picture. I think there's just one more.
It's easy to get to the building. Is it easy to get inside the building, Terrance?
Well, it's about as hard as that previous picture. Once you get in there.
Security slows you up, hauls you off to jail.
All right. I think this is the last one I'm going to share. And now this is the judge, Chester Crabbe tells us, who makes sure that everything is fair. But be quiet so the judge can listen. Sometimes they have a hard time listening and understanding. Other times they understand you quite well, but they'll try to confound your argument. So Chester the Crab should be telling you this too, boys and girls. And that's all I had to share with you today. You know, it's a break from the norm. I can't be bringing the informative issues every time to everyone. I thought it would be good to bring an informative set of topics for the boys and girls this time.
Oh, here's your lawyer or guardian ad litem.
Oh, there you go. And he helps you with your case if you're lucky.
Okay.
They know the law. Chester the Crab shouldn't unequivocally tell you that. A lot of lawyers do not know the law. So you can't relax. Sometimes they don't explain everything to the judge. And when you have a lawyer that does that, boys and girls, a lot of times you'll appeal your case and the judge will say harmless error. So,
Do they always tell the truth, Terrance?
well, I think that's a very
What did I show
it
last
depends on what lawyer you have.
last week about Charles Phillips from the Attorney General's office? Did you see all that paperwork I showed showing he lied 2 or 3 times?
I think that's why they call some lawyers liars. And these are the books it takes. A lot of years of studying to go to school and become a lawyer. It's hard work. And yet, you know what the funny part about this is, boys and girls? They don't go by these books at all half the time. They make up their own rules and laws as they go along because a lot of times they feel that they are above the law.
There's another book out there then that you don't have to show the audience, isn't there?
Yeah, well, I'm telling the boys and girls right now what the Chester the Crab should be telling them. But that's all I have for this week. Oh, I guess there is one more picture. This is the jury. These citizens were picked to listen to the case and then decide whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. And you know what? If you are giving these people literature outside the courtroom, and the literature, even if the literature that you're giving them is in regards to their rights as a juror, you know what, boys and girls, has been shown by here in Iowa, the judge may come out and threaten to arrest you for giving these people information that may enlighten them. So,
7 of them didn't show up. Did you notice that?
yeah.
There's only 5 on the panel.
Yeah, but some attorneys can't even count, including Phillips.
Okay.
Well, maybe they excuse them.
Well, the judge probably does, doesn't he?
And this is the balance, boys and girls. This is what you're supposed to get. Fair and equal treatment for all. The scales of justice. But you know what? In reality, the scale is tilted for the rich or the government. Can you show them? There you go. That's good. I didn't know we had special effects on the show. There we go. Yes.
What's the chance of it falling clear over?
It does a lot of times. But I think that's all we have to share. But just remember, boys and girls, you can't believe everything that Chester the Crab says in this book. You've got to think on your own about what's going on in the justice system, because it is a lot different than they try to portray. And I think it's a travesty that we have these books out there that are not telling the full story. But that's what this show is for. But that's all I have, Don and John.
Hey, thank you for filling in the cracks there. These boys and girls needed that coloring book. We probably ought to do one for Iowa, don't you suppose?
We need to do our own so we can put the full truth out there on
Correct.
what's actually going on.
Correct. Okay, I told you that I'd hoped to get to a story here on Cedar Rapids. This is a sad story. This is an expensive story because Iowans had to put up the money for a foolish project. These are people who have harebrained schemes and they think they can solve people problems, and if only they had the right amount of money. Well, there were some of these nonprofit organizations that decided to post all kinds of money in this experiment. In fact, they pumped $41 million into this 7-year experiment. $41 million. That's money that went to Cedar Rapids to do an experiment because it was a nonprofit corporation, and they had to get rid of that money somehow. Otherwise, they would have had to pay federal income tax on it. So the corporations know how to get rid of the money and to exert their influence into these things. And I say they have to take the credit for this very disappointing fiasco in Cedar Rapids. Well, experts hope they had a surefire remedy for preventing child abuse, a new concept that mobilizes everyone from neighbors to professionals to help struggling families. A private foundation picked Cedar Rapids and 3 other U.S. cities as test sites and pumped $41 million into a 7-year experiment. The results made public today were disappointing, said public researchers who tracked their efforts. This is by a registered staff writer, Jennifer Jacobs. She takes these cases from DHS and writes up the articles on them. The Cedar Rapids neighborhood selected because of the relatively high rates of reported crime, poverty, single-parent families, and child abuse saw only modest progress in reducing maltreatment, and the number of children placed in foster care did not go down, the study said. So if those were the goals, they didn't meet the goals. And money doesn't help, does it? Money in that public policy case, if we rely on the public policy, the money is not the true answer to our public policy questions. This is the policy. Difficult public policy problem? The solution is throw money at it. Okay. But parents guilty of abuse and Iowa child welfare officials say, give it time. Of course, we gave them 7 years. We believe the strategies will help. Well, those officials are ones who are filling their pockets, obviously, with part of this $41 million. So let's continue it. Since we know we're doing a terrible job, we can probably correct it with more time. Well, I'm glad to see that at least the state lawmakers are speaking up on this silly law they have on the 2,000-foot rule, and they want to tweak. Some of them want to tweak it, but it's not politically correct to say let's abandon it since it's a bad law in the first place. So we're doing at the state level what they did here at the Cedar Rapids level. Let's keep it going since it's such a bad experiment. Let's see how long people will cough up the money. Cedar Rapids resident Melissa Carter, 29, used meth for 10 years, even while she was pregnant. After Carter's 2 sons were removed from her care in January, child welfare advocates rallied around her using the new community partnership strategies, including monthly family team meetings. By the way, they're using those in other places as well. I love my children, and everybody I've worked with has been has seen that they've encouraged me to realize that I'm a good person, Carter said. They've respected me, and they showed me how to stay on track. I'm very comfortable now with my workers, where first I feared them. That ought to be the mission of the church, shouldn't it? To come around a hurting family and to deal with them, but these high-paid professionals couldn't do the job. Carter, whose urine tests prove she's now drug-free, regained custody of her boys in October. The idea behind the community partnership reform model is that child protection is the responsibility of everyone, parents and town residents, elected officials, educators, health care workers, community program workers, not just the Department of Human Services. So if there's an error made, it's not just the department's error, it's everybody's error. They're only too happy to share the blame for their errors. The most obvious practical reason for expanding child safety is the inability of the current child welfare agency to meet the service needs of all the families at risk, as a report by Chapin Hall Center for Children at the University of Chicago. Working with an annual $350,000 grant from Edna McConnell Clark Foundation, Cedar Rapids created patch teams of human service workers and service providers who are assigned to neighborhood resource centers and closely monitor the safety of children known to the DHS. I wonder where they were in Jetsetta's case. They certainly didn't monitor her satisfactorily, did they? Somebody was asleep at the switch. The city recruited and trained neighborhood partners who are residents who give parents rides to doctor's appointments, watch children, or give parents a break, or as well as helping in other ways. Seeing an overlap between domestic violence and child abuse, Cedar Rapids set up regular meetings between DHS workers and domestic violence workers who, with families' permission, talk about specific cases. A full-time worker facilitates family team members or team meetings to help parents after abuse or neglect allegations are made. The parents enlist a team, relatives, clergy, therapists, friends, substance abuse counselors, attorneys that help identify the family's needs and set goals to keep children safe. You want to start in that paragraph where it says Cedar Rapids did a good job with this, Don?
And it still don't have the impact, said the study's lead investigator, Deborah Darrow of the Chapin Hall Center for Children.
I think it's Chapin.
Chapin Hall Center for Children. I think it's because it's just not quite well thought out yet how people are going to create this community partnership.
They've only had 7 years to think it out.
It sounds great, but it's definitely not easy to make that happen. None of the 4 test sites, Cedar Rapids, St. Louis, Jacksonville, Florida, and Louisiana, Kentucky.
How about Louisville?
Louisville, Kentucky, could be. Yeah, you're right, John. The test sites had stellar outcomes. What's stellar mean, John?
Oh, up with the stars.
That's probably true. Darrow said. But there were slight improvements in reducing parents' depression and stress and boosting their feelings of empowerment. Slight improvement. Well, when you're spending...
41 million. You could, if they're only spending $41 million, you can only expect slight improvement, couldn't you? Sure.
Interviews with families in Cedar Rapids showed the partnership model also altered people's belief that the DHS's sole mission is to take children away with little regard for parents' personal circumstances. Now they're saying this is the agency that helps parents, Darrow said. That's great, but when we ask if more services are available, they said no. When we ask if the quality was better, they said no, it's not. Iowa child welfare advocates still find the community partnership approach appealing and criticize the study for prematurely judging the test sites. Cultural changes take a long time, and it's really difficult to measure, said Sandy Lent, a DHS administrator who coordinates the state's community partnerships. There is a movement, and it's really exciting across the state of Iowa with the communities coming together around this. There are now partnerships in 56 of Iowa's 99 counties, Each partnership area gets $20,000 in state money each year, a far stretch from Cedar Rapids grant money totaling $2.7 million since 1996. That should be a rich area over there, John. In the last year, 153 Cedar Rapids families with histories of abuse or neglect gathered for 274 family team meetings, said Gloria Johnson, Cedar Rapids project coordinator. Afterward, 83% said they felt their family situation was better as a result. I got one final comment from the beginning of the page by Jennifer Jacobs.
Okay,
as
go
John
ahead.
said, is a registered staff writer. She wrote at the top, the results. The analysis found no consistent impacts on preventing reabuse of children on or improving the availability or quality of services. So the results don't show much, again, for the money, does it, John? What do you got there, John, coming up on the screen?
This is one of their magnificent examples. This is that lady that they mentioned who was on meth. And she loved the program, but it did only slight improvements. Okay, we're going to step into that room where we found legislators talking, but we'll only have about a minute to listen to what they have to say. Maybe we can re-air this at another time. Okay, here's about a minute's worth of legislative discussion regarding the 1,000-foot rule and other ideas.
I did bring a copy of that PowerPoint presentation that I presented at the last committee meeting in October 26th. So that is, I think, before all members. So I don't know whether you'd like us to start taking some questions about different areas, or like us to cover some of those areas.
That'd be fine. Maybe we've got a couple of folks that already would like to question, so maybe we'll just go ahead and open kind of forum basis here and let people add as they see appropriate. Chair would recognize Senator Angelo.
What I want to ask is in regard to the difficulty in prosecuting these cases. As
This is Senator Angelo.
earlier, often
He's from Creston.
being witness to this particular crimes of victim, himself or herself. And I know that we've seen cases where it's increasingly, or it seems difficult for prosecutors to gather evidence of great conviction because you've got only one.
Thank you for visiting the CPI report. See you next week.